He brought her home at 2 a.m., a probationary employee. No explanations, no touch, but that morning, for the first time in 2 years, he slept. Amara opened her eyes to a glass-walled room. High ceiling, soft golden light, and a faint scent of warm ginger in the air. She sat up quickly. Her coat had been neatly removed and draped over a chair. Her eyes, still blurry, shifted toward the kitchen. Julian, in a white rolled-up shirt, was stirring a pot of porridge. She instinctively stepped back. She remembered nothing, only that her purse sat on the table. Her shoes were still on. Julian didn't look at her. His deep voice carried softly. "Ginger porridge. My grandmother used to make it when someone came in from a cold rain." Amara stayed silent, and Julian just smiled, because for the first time in countless sleepless nights, he had finally slept. What do you think helped Julian sleep after 2 years? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next part. Amara was a community college student in the Bronx. She studied during the day, waited tables at night, cleaned on weekends, and tutored elementary kids in between. Her hands were more familiar with bleach than ink, but her grades, always top of her class. On graduation day, Amara wore a rented gown. The cap sat loose. She smiled as she stepped up to receive her degree. In the crowd, a man in a gray shirt stood behind the trees. Her father, out of prison for just a month, too ashamed to get closer, but his eyes were wet, and he never looked away. Amara never saw him that day, only the sunlight flooding the schoolyard like a dream. She thought, "I'm never coming back to this neighborhood," but her heart never really left. Amara walked into the lobby of Remington Media wearing a second-hand suit she had ironed the night before. Worn heels, hair pinned up. She clutched her resume, nerves masked beneath cheap perfume. The interviewer scanned her file, silent for a moment. "No, Ivy League? Bronx Community College?" Then a dry chuckle. "Well, interesting." Amara stayed composed, presented her vision for a multicultural brand campaign. Her expression steady, eyes locked with his. 3 days later, she got the email. "Congratulations." Amara sat still, staring at the screen. For the first time, the very things they used to dismiss her were the reasons she was chosen. What she didn't know was that in the next room, Julian had been watching through the security camera, and he lingered, longer than usual. Julian once had a younger sister named Clara, 6 years his junior. She loved to draw, on windows, walls, whatever she could find, usually with their mother's lipstick. Clara died in a car accident at 13. The driver was the family's chauffeur, but Julian had chosen the route that day. After the funeral, he didn't speak for 3 months. His eyes stayed open through the night. His heart forgot how to rest. His mother only said, "Be strong. You're the heir. Don't let feelings ruin you like they did your father." So Julian learned to speak less, smile on cue, put duty before emotion. But Clara remained, in half-finished dreams, in the silence of his too large home. And from that day on, he never slept through the night again. Big meeting, high-stakes client. The lead presenter stammered, faltered. Tension strung tight in the room. Amara was there just to take notes. But when the slide malfunctioned and no one acted, she stood, calmly continued the presentation, her voice clear and firm. Her concept, a brand story that reflects real society, left the room in silence. Julian sat at the end of the table, eyes fixed on Amara from the moment she spoke. After the meeting, they entered the elevator together. She stood to the right, silent. He stood to the left, hands in pockets. Their eyes met for exactly 3 seconds. Amara nodded first, stepping out. Julian remained, watching the doors close. That night, he couldn't read a single report. His mind was full of her face. Amara didn't care for parties, but tonight marked Remington Media's 50th anniversary. Attendance was mandatory. Loud music. Endless drinks. A female colleague leaned in, smirking. "Impressive! No one expected a community college girl to make it this far." Amara didn't answer, just emptied her third glass. When she could barely stand, she slipped out onto the rooftop. The night wind cut sharp. Julian appeared behind her, said nothing, just removed his coat and placed it over her shoulders, then quietly walked her to the car. Amara leaned against the window, eyes heavy. He glanced at her. His hand hovered gently at her back, never lingering, just enough to keep her from falling, just enough for his heart to begin to shift. Soft light filtered through the curtains. Amara jolted awake. Her head pounded. She found herself on an unfamiliar sofa. Thin, clean blanket. Clothes untouched. Purse beside her. Shoes under the couch. Her heartbeat spiked. She sat upright, scanning the room. The kitchen lights were on. Julian stood at the stove, stirring something. She blurted out, What did I do? I don't remember anything from last night." He didn't look up, just said gently, "It's okay. Ginger porridge. My grandma used to make it when I was sick." Amara said nothing. Julian placed the bowl on the table and stepped out onto the balcony. No judgment, no questions, no hidden looks. Just a man, keeping his distance, and, somehow, shaking the stillness in her heart. Amara told herself to draw a line. Keep it professional. She was an employee. He was the CEO. On Monday morning, she entered the meeting room, avoiding his gaze. Eyes on the screen. Just enough words. No more, no less. But his eyes were still there. Still. Deep. Not intrusive, but unwavering. In later meetings, Julian still said little, but whenever Amara spoke, his gaze lingered longer than anyone else's. She felt it, even when she didn't look up, even seated at the farthest end of the table. Once, after a meeting ended, Amara stood to leave. Julian stayed seated, watching her go. No words exchanged, but the distance between them was shrinking. She knew it, and that terrified her. Amara was nominated for creative director, top of the shortlist. Her latest campaign broke revenue records. But in a closed-door board meeting, someone said, "I won't question her talent, but the upper echelon requires cultural fit." Another voice added, "High-profile clients need a certain sync. Not everyone gets it coming from the Bronx." Julian slammed his hand on the table. The water glass trembled. "Talent doesn't come with a zip code." Silence. Then a calm voice from the head of the table, his mother. "Julian, this is a board meeting, not a lecture on feelings." Julian clenched his fists, said no more. Outside, Amara waited. She couldn't hear a thing, but as people exited, none looked her way. And Julian was the quietest of them all. Charlotte returned to Remington as a special advisor. Red stilettos, razor-sharp smile, Julian's former flame, and the daughter of a major investor. That afternoon, Amara was carrying files to the copier when Charlotte passed by. She paused, gave her a slow once-over, then smirked. Perfect fit, a fresh breeze. Be careful, though, this CEO tends to change tastes by season. Amara didn't respond, just held her gaze. Charlotte raised an eyebrow and walked off. The sound of her heels echoed down the marble hallway. Amara stood still, her chest tight with something unfamiliar. Not fear, but clarity. That this game was no longer simple. Amara stood in a long black gown at the center of a luxury auction hall. Art on the walls. Wine flowing like water. Conversations drifted in polished, airy English, layered with undertones. She approached the featured painting. Dark, angular strokes. An older woman glanced sideways and frowned faintly. Charlotte appeared, wine glass in hand, lips curled into a smirk. "Lovely, but this isn't a community college fundraiser." A few soft chuckles followed. Eyes turned toward Amara like she'd wandered into the wrong room. The auctioneer asked, "Are you sure you want to place a bid on this piece?" Amara tightened her grip on her clutch. Her fingers brushed a nameless black card. Heartbeat, a bell about to ring. She didn't answer, but her eyes no longer looked down. The auction room fell silent for 3 seconds. Amara stepped forward, took out the black card and placed it on the table, her voice steady. No need to raise it. 500,000. The entire room turned to face her. The auctioneer paused, then confirmed. "Lot 17, sold to Miss Sinclair." Charlotte clenched her glass until her knuckles turned white. She said nothing. Julian rose from the back row, calm. He looked directly at the board and spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "She's the person I trust most at Remington." A second of silence. Then the shutters clicked. The stares shifted. "What do you think? A black woman from the Bronx holding a black card, buying $500,000 art among elites. Is that pride or a threat to their world?" After the auction, Julian didn't ride back with the board. He drove himself, waited at the lobby doors. Amara stepped out and silently got in. A quiet diner on an old street corner, no cameras, no wine, just sandwiches, lemonade, and warm yellow light. Amara took off her necklace and placed it on the table. Her hands still trembled from the night. Julian didn't speak. He slid her plate forward. After a while, she said, "I don't want to be anyone's story. I don't want to be the Bronx phenomenon or a headline. I just want peace. I want to do my job. That's it." Julian looked at her, eyes softening. "And if peace isn't an option?" She gave a tired smile. "Then I'll finish what I came to do and disappear." An old video surfaced online. Grainy quality, but the voice was clear. Putting black people in leadership is like handing a gun to a child. The man in the video, Julian's father, founder of Remington Media. The internet exploded. Hashtag Remington racist trended. Advertisers pulled out. Headlines spread. News channels showed his face side by side with the company logo. Below it, a legacy of supremacy? Amara sat in a coffee shop. Her phone buzzed nonstop. A stranger leaned over and whispered, "You're the only black manager there, right? This is going to be interesting." At HQ, Julian stared at the screen. The clip replayed 3 times. No one asked for his opinion, because this time, he wasn't the one under fire, but Amara was. The 52nd floor boardroom, thick glass, cold wood floor, white light washed over unreadable faces. Julian's mother sat across from him, hand resting lightly on a stack of files. "You're letting a personal relationship destroy a legacy. You need to end it, or step down." Julian didn't reply. He just stared at her, long enough that others might call it blank, but she knew that look. It was defiance. "Remington isn't a place to test compassion," she said. "It's a corporation, a strategy, a family structure." Still, silence. His fingers gripped the armrest slightly. His gaze shifted to a framed photo on the wall. No Clara. No trace of feeling, just an image of people who knew when to bow. He didn't, but now wasn't the time to speak. The front page of a tabloid showed Amara leaving Remington HQ. Headline in bold, "From shelter to CEO's favorite. Is the foundation clean enough?" Below it, details. At age 12, Amara lived in a homeless shelter. Her father, Marcus Sinclair, arrested once for resisting police. Amara stood before the bathroom mirror. No makeup. Simple tea. Water dripping from wet hair. A memory surfaced. She was 7. Her father, handcuffed in their front yard. She screamed, clutching his shirt. A cop shoved her back. Her dad turned and whispered, "Don't be scared. Just stand still." The mirror showed the woman she had become, but in her eyes. The child still hadn't forgotten. Julian knocked on Amara's apartment door. It was raining. His shirt soaked. Phone still open to the article. She opened it, but didn't let him in. "You didn't need to come." Her voice low, eyes steady. Julian paused, then said, "I don't care what they write. I just want to know if you're okay." Amara gave a dry smile. "I don't need saving, especially not from you." Julian's hands tightened. "I don't think you're weak. I think you've been holding this alone, and She cut him off. "The problem is, I've learned how to carry things, and every time someone walks in like a hero, I have to prepare myself for when they leave." The door closed quietly, no sound, but heavier than any goodbye. In a private office meeting, Charlotte crossed her legs, flipping through the newspaper. "Shame the media always digs up people's past," she said lightly, like talking about the weather. Julian stood across from her, silent. His eyes locked onto hers. She smiled, set the paper down. "The issue isn't Amara. It's that I've waited long enough to be where I was promised." He stilled. She continued, "Your father always wanted me to succeed him. I have the pedigree, the image, the clean background. And her? She's a liability." Julian narrowed his eyes. "You leaked the video?" Charlotte didn't deny it. She simply said, "Remington needs people who follow orders, not people who feel too much." The closed-door meeting began. Board seated in a circle, files distributed. Charlotte spoke first, her tone calm. "Remington is suffering a serious image crisis. We need a representative who aligns with our brand values, safe and consistent." Julian stood, no folder in hand, no glance at anyone but her. "Safe means dishonest? Means we're okay tarnishing a woman because of where she's from?" No one answered. He turned to the board, voice low but clear. "If Remington chooses a lie, then I'll choose truth. Even if that means I no longer carry this name." Silence. His mother looked up. Charlotte gripped her chair. Julian didn't wait. He walked out, leaving behind a question no one dared to answer. Amara closed her laptop, packed every document into her bag. No notice, no goodbye. She pressed the elevator and stepped into Remington's main lobby one last time. Those who passed by glanced, then looked away. No one stopped her. No one tried. The revolving doors opened slowly. Afternoon sun hit her face. A breeze lifted the edge of her coat. On the 52nd floor, Julian stood behind the tall glass window. He looked down, watched her figure grow smaller in the crowd. His hand pressed against the glass. He didn't call, didn't move, just stood there. A man torn between logic and the thing he failed to hold on to. Amara didn't look back. Not because she didn't want to, but because she knew. If she did, she wouldn't have the strength to walk away. A strange call. The assistant's voice invited Amara to the Remington estate. She was surprised, but went. The sitting room was quiet, the tea still warm. Vivian, Julian's mother, waited, draped in cream silk, her fingers resting lightly on a porcelain cup. "Thank you for coming. I know my son wasn't strong enough to keep you." Amara opened her mouth, but Vivian raised her hand. "When I was 23, I once loved a black man." The air froze. "He studied architecture, laughed a lot, and he was poor. I chose silence. I chose my family. I chose the Remington name." She pulled out an old photo from a drawer, a young man holding wildflowers, beaming. "I'm not proud, but I understand you." For the first time, Amara saw the powerful woman before her, not looking down. Vivian opened a small cabinet beside her. She took out two things, a worn leather journal and a sealed envelope. "My diary, and the letter I once wrote before walking away." Amara accepted them, hands slightly trembling. "These pages hold the things I was never allowed to say, the truths a Remington woman was forbidden to admit." Vivian took a deep breath, eyes steady on hers. "You're the first in this family without the Remington name, but the only one brave enough to stand tall." Amara said nothing. She gripped the journal. Vivian gave a faint nod. "This mistake, I leave to you to correct." No public statement, no board vote. Just a moment, where power was handed over with a look. No signature needed, only trust. The next morning, headlines across major news outlets blazed. Julian Vance, the heir who let go of the Remington name. In an official release, Julian confirmed, "I will continue my business journey, but no longer under the name built on silence." He adopted his grandmother's maiden name, the woman who taught him to write and believed lineage should never chain a soul. The media split. Supporters called him a symbol of generational change. Critics branded him a disgrace who turned his back on legacy. Julian didn't respond. He posted one line on his personal account, "A name doesn't define worth, but truth does." And you? Would you cling to the safe name, or dare to live as who you truly are? The main boardroom was full. Amara walked in alone. Crisp white blouse, hair tied back. No Julian, no entourage. She stood before the long table, looked at each face, and began. "I once thought I had to work twice as hard to be seen as half enough, but today I don't need permission to be worthy." Silence. No interruptions. "I didn't enter this world through the back door, and I'm not waiting for someone to open the front. I bring myself, and everyone who was ever told they weren't enough." She placed a new brand strategy on the table, rooted in multicultural values. "You have a choice. Continue building an empire on exclusion, or rewrite it with truth." She stepped back. No request for a vote, because the test she'd already passed. 3 days later, an internal investigation concluded quickly. Charlotte was found guilty of manipulating internal documents and leaking confidential info to the press. The board didn't protect her. An elder member muttered, "Those who truly rise don't need to push others down." Charlotte left the Remington building in silence. No farewell. No one followed. At the next meeting, Vivian entered, unannounced. Her eyes found only Amara. "I waited too long for someone like you. Today, I formally appoint Amara Sinclair as Senior Global Advisor." The room froze. Amara didn't bow. She smiled, because this time no one could say she didn't fit the culture. The elevator doors closed. Amara stood alone. No more signs to follow. No more explanations to give. No one left to prove anything to, and just then the tears came, not from pain, but from holding it all back for far too long. Ground floor. Doors opened. Julian stood there, hands empty, eyes red from lack of sleep. She stepped forward. He whispered, "Don't go." Amara paused. Julian took one step closer. "I don't just need you to sleep. I need you to survive." For the first time she saw him shake, not from fear, but from love. No one touched, just two people in a grand lobby, both who had lost much, but found the courage to begin again. The glass dome that once rejected Amara for not being the right class was now lit with white flowers and golden candles. Guests no longer questioned her background. They simply smiled as she walked each step. She wore a simple satin dress, held a bouquet of wildflowers, just like the photo Vivian had once shown her. Julian waited. No tailored suit, just a man who chose truth over legacy. When the music began, it wasn't a classical love song. It was Vivian's voice, from an old recording. "If you're hearing this, it means you've done what I never dared. I'm proud, because finally," Remington bowed to kindness. Amara looked up, eyes wet, but no tears fell, because this time, she didn't enter their world. They stepped into hers. At the Remington Africa headquarters, a modest stage hosted a quiet ceremony. Marcus Sinclair, Amara's father, stood in a simple suit, no longer restless. Amara sat below, hand intertwined with Julian's. No media frenzy, no grand speeches, just a man once shut out by society. Now handed the keys. Marcus took the mic, his voice low but steady. "I used to think freedom was walking out of a cell. But it's not. Freedom is being trusted again." The room stayed silent. Then came applause. Amara smiled, eyes shining, because he was no longer just her father. He was proof the past can be rewritten if someone dares to believe people can change. Dusk fell. Evening light stretched across the wrought iron balcony. Amara stood quietly. A breeze danced around her dress. Her hand rested on her belly, gentle, like a whispered secret. Julian stepped behind her, didn't speak, just wrapped his arms around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder, their breaths in sync. No words needed, because in that moment, everything was said. A love that had survived storms, a beginning born where endings once lived. Amara looked up at the sky. "I'm scared," she whispered. Julian's voice met the back of her neck. "So am I, but this time, we don't walk alone." Laughter echoed from a nearby park. She closed her eyes, because a future was growing inside her, and in both their hearts. If you've ever been judged for who you are, for where you come from, for the skin you wear, or the past you didn't choose, this story was for you. They say some things can't be changed. Bloodlines, gender, color, but you can choose who you become starting today. Amara chose, Julian chose, and even those who once stood at the top had to choose again, if they ever wanted to live truthfully. Don't let anyone make you bow for what you should never apologize for. Don't let silence be all you carry. If you still believe, type below, "I still believe," and share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes one story can change an entire life. Subscribe to hear more stories like this. We don't walk alone.